Oh, it was horrible.
Ah, there we go.
Now
Yay, James.
it starts automatically. Okay, I'll be in and out tonight, so hope you guys have a great training time.
Cool.
We should have one more family come in, correct? We should be
Yeah.
the Schweitzers
No,
should be coming in.
yeah, Bakers
The
are out
Bakers are
tonight,
not.
but
Okay.
Schweitzers should be coming.
Well, let's give them a few more minutes and see if they pop in here in the next 2 minutes. And if not, we'll dive in. And
I just realized they're getting a nice recording of us eating our spaghetti.
somebody,
Should we do one of those Lady and the Tramp moments
oh yes, would you please? Would you please?
All of our
with our spaghetti squash that's so disgusting?
Susan, they said that because there happened to have been an instance, perhaps.
I've told Susan about
Yeah,
it.
I've
But
heard that story.
Aaron and James aren't in on this story. So Aaron and James, are you actually there? Maybe not. Okay. Yeah. I was supposed to meet with her yesterday morning, actually, and we were going to crochet and we were going to talk parenting, and we have had one really good parenting conversation.
Did you tell Ronnie about? We've talked to her twice,
Okay,
a little bit. All
good,
positive. She called us on Lyric's birthday and we said happy birthday, and
sweet.
she opened her book that we sent with him.
She could not wait to open that book. I mean, mom was so excited about opening that book.
She was pretty excited to show it to us.
Yeah.
The kid opened it and she goes, oh, "It's a Eben? It's a Eben house? Go read 9999." Like,
Well, I was there about a week ago, and she was just talking and talking and talking, and I'm going,
Uh-huh.
and I looked at mom, and mom said, she thinks she's gonna go to Evan and Alyssa's on Friday. I'm not sure why she thinks that, but and so I'm just going, okay. And it was gonna be on Friday.
That's funny.
So, well, you know what? Let me adjust this. That goes away. Let's pray real quick as we get started, and then we will dive in. So, Heavenly Father, we just come before you tonight, and we thank you for the opportunity that we have to serve you. We thank you for preparing us in a multitude of ways, with a variety of strengths and of gifts and of passions that you have given each of us. And we just ask, Lord, that this time that we have together tonight will further prepare us for serving you in very specific ways through Families Together. I thank you, Lord, for each and every one of these families that is joining us and that is and taking steps to reach out and find ways to support those that you love so much, those that are hurting and broken. We just thank you, Lord, for all that you've given us the opportunity to do. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, we're gonna do the whole screen share thing. Let's see how this works. Oh, look at that. That is not what I wanted to share tonight. And I'm definitely not even where I want to be. There we go. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. I see some of you have already muted yourself, and we're going to probably have you unmute here pretty quick. You can stay muted for another minute or two, but we're going to have some interaction on this as well tonight. So we're going to talk about boundaries tonight. Actually, I'll start with boundaries, and then our CEO, Roy, will be coming in and giving us an overview of the 40 developmental assets. I can even say that right. All right, so starting off with boundaries, we're just going to kind of do the what, the why, and the how of boundaries. And I am not Henry Cloud or even John Townsend. So we are not going to go into depth on all of the specifics and the theories and all of that behind boundaries. We are looking tonight at utilizing boundaries specifically in the area of families together and working in a host home setting, or also just working with families. So to start with, we're going to start with the what side of it. What are boundaries? We're going to kind of give a definition, but I really also want to just kind of dig in and get a feel, not for a specific definition, but how do we each view what boundaries are and what they look like? And then we'll talk a little bit about the purpose of boundaries. So I think there's a rule out there somewhere that says if you're defining something, you have to have some sort of a dictionary definition. So here we go, because I got to do it right. Dictionary, Merriam-Webster says boundaries. A boundary is something that indicates or fixes a limit or extent. And I know you all feel greatly blessed by that. So maybe we should just quit, right? Now we know it all. A limit or extent, though, really, what are my limits as I'm working with families, as I'm working with children, as I am doing families together with other people? Henry Cloud, you can't talk about boundaries without having Henry Cloud as part of it. And his definition is just pretty simple. It's a property line that defines what is yours and what is your neighbor's. So what is mine and what is my neighbor's? And we think of that as possessions first off. Where does my line of mowing the lawn begin, and where is my neighbor's mowing the lawn? And you know, who is in charge of raking the leaves? Is it my tree or is it their tree? What are those kind of things? But also we need to think in terms of responsibilities. If I'm taking a responsibility for somebody else, I'm doing something that they should be doing. So we want to define all of what is mine and what is my neighbor's. And the last one we're going to look at is Brene Brown. And we're actually going to watch a video of Brene Brown later on tonight. And her definition is so simple. It's what's okay and what's not okay. And what I love about that is because of our different perspectives, because of our different values, because of our different roles in our society and in life, what's okay for me may not be okay for you. So our boundaries do not have to be the same across the board. They are what's okay for me. If I'm setting a boundary for me, I need to worry about me, not what's okay for someone else or what someone else thinks is okay for me. So there's our basic definition, but I want to do some compare and contrast kind of things here. And we're going to talk about weak boundaries versus strong boundaries. We're going to talk about unhealthy boundaries versus healthy boundaries. So we're going to start with weak boundaries. And if I were to give you a piece of paper and a marker or a bunch of markers or Play-Doh and tongue depressors and toothpicks, whatever, and ask you to draw or build something that represents a weak boundary. What are you going to draw? What are you going to build? Go ahead and let's just kind of have a conversation. Go ahead and unmute and let's kind of talk about this.
A shallow ramp.
A shallow ramp. Talk to me about that.
It's not very hard to get up or over.
Ah, okay, got it. All right. Great.
Play-Doh, you know.
Play-Doh. Okay. What else?
I was thinking a wall of sand. That doesn't go into any of the things you gave me. That when you build sand, it just kind of gets pushed away.
Right. Good. That's excellent. Somebody else? Anybody else?
Fence falling down.
A fallen down fence. Yeah. Those are all great examples of weak boundaries. And when I
Thanks for the visual. Thanks for the visual.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah. Guys, we might need to have a little bit more intensive discussion on boundaries with you too. But
I mean, that's not our boundary is the chain link metal fence. That's fine.
okay,
Uh,
good.
Their boundary is the wooden fence that's zip tied to our fence.
That's too funny.
Yeah.
So
So our boundaries are not the same.
there you go. That's exactly it. Our boundaries are different. Yeah. The line between one place and another place. What do I have here? James just put a good dating boundary leaves room for the Holy Spirit. Lol. There we go, James. Right. All right. When I think of a weak boundary, I'm kind of along the same line as Susan. I can make my computer. There we go. A weak boundary. I saw, I mean, this is kind of no boundary. There's nothing to block the intense heat and the intense sunlight. There's nothing to block the wind. It's just everything just kind of moves back and forth with the breeze, with the flow of things. And what grows here is nothing. A weak boundary does not let us settle in and figure out exactly where we fit and what we need to do. When we think about what motivates a weak boundary, it's often motivated by a need for acceptance or a fear of rejection, which are kind of two sides of the same coin. But a need for acceptance, I have to do what you think I have to do because I don't want to disappoint you. I have to do the things that everybody's asking me to do because if I don't, I'm going to hurt somebody's feeling. Fear of rejection. I don't want anybody to dislike me. I need to be in everybody's good graces. Okay, you guys did great with the weak boundary. Let's move on to a strong boundary. When you think of a strong boundary, what comes to mind?
I'm reading historical novels right now, and I'm thinking of a stockade around like the fort.
There you go. Stockade around a fort. Sure. Great example. Somebody else.
A house.
A house. A house can be a strong boundary. Absolutely. Good. Again, I went to the extreme on this. That's kind of a strong boundary, right?
There's nothing weak about it.
No. And it's really the exact opposite of that desert.
Mhm.
No sunlight gets in here. No wind gets in here. And nothing gets out of here either. Is this all bad? Our Nebraska Department of Corrections, I spent 6 years going into correctional facilities and working with inmates. And so I know our Nebraska Department of Corrections says that their mission statement is keeping people safe. If this is working right, is that keeping people safe? Absolutely. Absolutely. What's going to motivate? But the thing is, this is keeping the bad out, or in this case, the bad in, but it's not letting the good in. What this is motivated often by a need for power, control, and structure. Is that a bad need to have? I mean, Is it bad to have power, control, and structure? Probably not. But look at that second one. It's also a need or a fear of rejection. So when we saw the weak boundaries being motivated by a fear of rejection, that is, I'm afraid that if I don't do what makes you happy or what you think I should do, you are going to reject me. A strong boundary, if it's motivated by a fear of rejection, says, if I let you see what's inside of me, you're going to reject me. So I'm going to build a fortress around me so nobody can get in and nobody can hurt me. The thing with this, our greatest strengths out of balance become our greatest pitfalls. It's not necessarily all bad to have weak boundaries. A lot of times, spiritualese, we think of a weak boundary as somebody who has too much grace and not enough truth, or a strong boundary as somebody who has too much truth and not enough grace. But it's our greatest strengths out of balance. So the difference between a healthy and an unhealthy boundary is determined by how we balance our strengths and our gifts. What are the things that we need to adjust so that we can reach out and serve people in an effective way? We're going to talk about healthy versus unhealthy, or unhealthy versus healthy, actually. Here we have another example of a strong boundary, right? We've got the fortress, we've got the, I'm positive that there's crocodiles in that water. I just know it, right? Everybody's agreeing. Thanks, everybody. We know that there's crocodiles in that water. The drawbridge is up. Nobody can get across. It's a strong boundary, but is it a healthy boundary? I believe that a healthy boundary is not a stone-cold castle complete with ramparts and crocodile-infested moats. It is a boundary. We're going to be protected in that boundary, but is it necessarily healthy? I like the look of this better. What are the examples of boundaries that we see in this picture?
There's a hoppable fence. And
A
also
hoppable
you can
fence.
see through.
Yep.
There's
So what's that, Susan?
there's windows that keep the rain out or let fresh air in.
Exactly. And we can, at the same time, let's fresh air in and out, keeps bugs out, right? I'm guessing, I can't see for sure, but I'm guessing there's screens on those windows, right?
Sure.
There's the fence. What I like about the fence, you said it's hoppable, Alyssa. I don't know. I don't know. It probably is. But my mind was thinking, if I'm out in that garden and working with those beautiful flowers and my neighbor walks by, I can have a conversation with my neighbor. But if she is walking a mean dog who's growling and barking, maybe that fence will keep the dog away from me, right? If I'm out in the garden and I am working with the beautiful flowers and I see a door-to-door salesman come by, I can go in the door and lock the door. I don't have to talk to them at all. The thing, also, we've got a roof on this house. We've got walls on this house. It's going to, another thing that's going to block the intense sunlight, but I can come out if I want. It's all kinds of protection. Here's the thing with our boundaries with people, we need to have layers with it. And our layers may be our values, our layers may include our belief system. Our layers should include our care community, our family members, our spouse, partner, adult children. All of those things can be part of our layers. And actually, as we're talking about families together, Libby and I will be part of the layers of your boundaries as well. So a healthy boundary should provide a means for physical and emotional protection. But at the same time, it should create the physical and emotional space that we need to share our life with others, to be hospitable. Boundaries are going to offer protection. They're going to offer a framework for a healthy life. I can walk away from the annoying salesperson, but I can have a conversation with a friend who's come to visit. They also offer control. Sometimes we think of control as a bad word in the Christian life. I don't have control. God has control, right? Except for there are things that God gives us control over. One of the things God does not give us control over are other people. If we're setting our boundaries to try to control other people, we're gonna have problems. Because when we utilize boundaries, we only get to set a boundary for ourselves and around the things that God has given us to control. If I'm trying to control something that I'm not given control over, another human being, my end result will be frustration, loss of personal control, loss of respect from the other person, resentment, and burnout. And for an example, have you ever tried to make a 2-year-old pee on the pot? I mean, there are things that we absolutely cannot control about other people. I went into potty training with my oldest child, and my gosh, 2 years, I had been able to control every detail of this little human's life. And all of a sudden, she made it very clear to me, no, I was extremely frustrated. My frustration put me in my downstairs brain. I, at times, lost control of my own emotions. If we're trying to control another human, I don't know if my 2-year-old necessarily thought about the loss of respect. I don't know that that was in her vocabulary yet, but oh my goodness, I resented that. And eventually I was so exhausted, I just gave up and put diapers back on her, right? If we try to control something that we were not given control over, things go south quick. So again, what are some of the things that God has given us to control, or if we don't like the word control, to steward? Yes, it's your turn to talk.
My time.
Your time, absolutely. What else?
My own health. I mean, going to your doctor's appointments the way you should, taking the medicine the way you should.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's our responsibility, isn't it? What is my responsibility? What is someone else's responsibility? Good.
My attitude or my responses to a situation.
Right. Attitude, responses. Exactly. There we go. We said my time. How about my energy? We need to control our own energy. We need to decide, we need to prioritize what kinds of things I need to give my energy to and what kinds of things I need to say no to. Emotions. Oh my goodness, this is a big one. I'm sure that you've heard other people say it. I'm sure you've never said it, because I know I never have. That person makes me so mad. Who did I just give control of my emotions to? Or the other one around my emotions is, when I get angry, I just can't control it. I just have to let people know what I'm thinking or feeling or whatever. No, I am given responsibility over my emotions. I am supposed to have self-control. My possessions, I get to decide. We had a little guy here today, and Libby shared a motorcycle, I think. Is it a motorcycle, Libby?
It's kind of broken, but it is the treasured toy of every child that comes in the door.
And Libby shared that with him. And when it was time to go, he wanted to keep it. Libby got to choose. That was Libby's prized motorcycle. It's now with this sweet little guy. It might come back to us someday, but today it went home with this guy. Might be a thing of green Play-Doh. Alyssa, I still have your green Play-Doh. I don't know.
Let's keep it. Give it to a different little guy.
My relationships, which include my relationships with family and my friendships. I know that there have been times that I have prioritized friendships or other people over my family. If I'm giving one individual too much of my time or my energy or my emotions, that means I'm robbing somebody else of the time and energy that they should be getting from me. So it's all about balancing the gifts that God has given us, whether they are physical gifts or spiritual gifts or emotional gifts. These are all things that we are to effectively steward. So how, not necessarily how, but what does this look like? I cannot control somebody else. We're going to just look at two quick examples. You can't keep calling me all the time. Do I really have control over that? No, I do not have the ability to even control somebody else's possession called their cell phone. If they want to pick up their cell phone and call me, I can't do anything about that. What I can do is I can set a boundary on my time. I can say I'm only available to talk or to take a call at this time and this time. If you call at any other time, I'm not going to be able to answer. And then if they call, I have the ability to hit the ignore button or even to block it if I need to, if it gets to that point. Another one, stop yelling at me. You need to show respect. Do I have the ability to control somebody else's words or somebody else's emotions, their beliefs, their attitudes? I absolutely do not. But that doesn't mean that I have to sit and be berated or be yelled at. One option, and anytime we have something like that, there's a gazillion options, but one option is I think we're both getting frustrated with this conversation. So I am going to take some time to calm down. Can we touch base in 30 minutes? Can we touch base tomorrow at lunch? Can we talk about this if we give a really specific time, we aren't abandoning this person, which if we're in a heated conversation, they may feel abandoned if we walk away from it. So we say, can we come back? This is important to me. I want to clear this up. Can we discuss it later? Do we have any thoughts, any comments, any questions while we're kind of sitting here? All right. So let's look into the why.
Sorry, I was going to say something that's important is that you say the boundary before the boundary is crossed.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, very good. We need to do that. Yeah, well, I like that. I'm going to follow up on that in a few minutes, Alyssa. Thank you for bringing that up. Very good. So let's talk about the why of boundaries. We're gonna touch on our relational responsibilities and our relational dynamics with the families that we're going to be serving. But before we do this, some people are going to ask, why are we spending so much time talking about boundaries in a Families Together training? Aren't we here to selflessly serve people in need? Yes. We are. We are here to selflessly serve people in need. And I am thankful for every one of you that are here on this Zoom call with me right now, and every one of you that is going to watch it, the recording, and wants to step into this roller coaster. Yes, we are here to selflessly serve people in need. If I set a boundary or say no to the parents that I'm working with, won't they get mad at me? Yes. Yes, they probably will. That also is a yes. If I cross my boundary, if I tear my boundary down in order to appease anybody, specifically a parent that I'm working with, I am actually guilty of trying to control someone else's behavior or someone else's emotions. If I say yes to something I need to say no to because I don't want them to get mad, I am all of a sudden taking ownership and responsibility for their anger. And that is just not my job. And again, I will be controlling something, trying to control something that is not mine to control. So let's get into this a little bit. Libby kind of built a nice little tower, and I've got these odd shaped circles that you have to put up with my circles today. So we have different areas of responsibility, and we could have a gazillion circles, as many as come in the pond, the ripple of the pond when you throw the rock in. I'm just going to do 2. So we have our inner circle of the responsibilities that God has said, these are your top priorities. Your relationship with God, your relationship with a spouse if you have one, and your relationship with children if you have them. I started to say have one, have them. The thing is, sometimes we pull other things in. That's okay. That's between me and God, you and God. Who is in that inner golden circle that he has given us responsibility? And how are we going to steward those relationships? We've got that inner circle, and then in our green circle, we've got what Libby called a couple weeks ago the village, our extended family, our friends, our work relationships, our teammates in our sports things, sports teams, not sports things, right? Our teams, right? We decide who's in our village. We decide how much time we're going to get. Can you guys see my mouse? Can you see my cursor? So, I mean, in order for y'all to see this, I had to use big letters on this, but honestly, we're going to have some people that are going to be here right close to this white line. And we're going to have some people that are still in our village, but they're clear out toward this black line. And we get to decide where they're at in our relationship. So we have this all sorted out. We're doing life and it's working good. And Libby gives us a call and says, hey, guess what? We have a request for a hosting. And we've talked to them, and we know your situation. We know that we think that you would be maybe a great option for a host home. What do you think? You ready to do this? And you think, man, if you look at the circle, it's kind of full already. What are we going to do? Remember, our boundaries aren't just things that keep things out. They also let the good in. So what we're going to ask you to do is open some of that up. And we want it to look something like this. Obviously, we have to squish things around a little bit to make sure that we are able to give priority. But we're asking you to add the children into that inner circle. We're asking you to love on those kids. We're asking you to depend on your care community to help with meals. So you can, instead of prepare a meal, you can spend some extra time with the kids and your spouse, if you have one, and your children, if you have them. We're asking, and God, because you do have him. we're asking you to have the care community hit the grocery store for you. So now you've got that extra hour, hour and a half to again focus on the people in here. We're asking you to utilize your care community in order to really be able to put a lot of time and attention, not only into those things that are already your priority, but this added addition of the children. We would like you to bring mom into your village, not into your inner circle. If mom at some point moves closer to your white line here, or black line, whatever color, white line here, that's great. That's fantastic. But if she needs to stay out here, that's okay too. We just, I mean, you're going to have to do some communicating with her, but we also want to let you know it's okay to set boundaries. And it might be, I've got FT mom because that had the fewest letters and it's the most common. We may have a families together dad. We may have a families together couple. That's all great. But we want to make sure that you understand what our expectations are. And if it seems like, well, that's kind of giving mom the short end of the stick, well, it's not. Because the family advocate, which right now is me, is going to pull that families together mom into her inner circle. That's where I get to be one of the layers of boundaries. And Evan and Alyssa, I know have taken advantage of that. There were days that they had one of the moms that they were working with that was kind of a handful. And so they used the layer and they said, hey, Ronnie, can you talk to mom about this? Hey, Ronnie, this is what mom is doing or saying. And we really just want to be able to focus on her child. That's using your layers of boundaries. And that's what I'm here for. Not all of our moms are going to be pushing boundaries. We have a mom, I mean, we definitely have some. The last two hostings that we've done, honestly, our moms have pushed boundaries big time. We have a mom that has requested a hosting in June. And we are preparing for that. And I had a conversation. I've actually been working with her 6 months, maybe now. I don't know, quite a while. And had a conversation with her the other day. And she said, I told my kids that I'm going to be really picky about this situation. And there's 3 things. The first thing, the family that's going to do this has to want to do it. I'm going, nobody's going to go through training unless they want to do this. So got that one covered. They have to be willing to meet me before the hosting starts. And I have to get a good vibe. And I'm thinking, pretty sure that our families are really good at giving good vibes. So got that one covered. And then I said, okay, what's the third one? And she said, they have to be willing to communicate what their boundaries are. I am so willing to meet their boundaries. I just have to know what they are. In order for you to communicate what your boundaries are, you also have to know, what is your comfort level? Where, are you comfortable letting them have your phone number? If you're not, that's okay. We can work around that. We can do a Google phone number. We'll sort out how to do that. You guys, Evan and Alyssa, I think had to use Facebook Messenger. Is that right?
Yeah, we did Facebook Messenger, but that was supposed to be so that mom could talk to her child.
Okay. Are you comfortable having her on Facebook? Maybe, maybe not. That's okay too. Right now, I don't have
Also,
any.
Ronnie, we also set a time period for how long we would be friends on Facebook.
Right.
Like, I will unfriend you on this day.
And you made that very clear at our meet and greet. On this day, I will have to unfriend you. And she understood that. She actually pushed boundaries, but we've also had some conversations. She's got a clear understanding of boundaries. Just, you know. So again, there's that, communicate what your boundaries are. And James isn't on. I'm not sure that we have homework, but that is something
I'm
to.
here. I'm here.
Oh, you are here. James, do we have homework
And
for?
we do.
We do have
Yeah.
homework for this. Okay.
Yeah, there's a the boundaries. I can't remember exactly what it's called. Boundaries something exercise reflection, I think, and it's just on the training portal website under session 4. You'll see the link there. It's just like a one-sided page with some reflection questions. If you're into writing and journaling, you can do that. Otherwise, just kind of think through those in your head or verbally. But one of the questions Ronnie wanted on there was, talk to your spouse or a best friend or somebody who knows you really well to kind of, work through some of the things to ask them, because other people will know your boundaries better than you know your boundaries. So
Sometimes, yeah.
sometimes they'll go, yep, you always say yes, or you never say yes. So
Yeah.
yeah, look at that on there and we'll remind you that at the end.
Another thing that you can do is sit down and say, what areas are we comfortable? What things where do we need to set boundaries, and where are we coming? Are we comfortable letting them call us all the time? How many times a day do we want to text? How many times a day do we want to, stop our lives so that they can communicate with their kids? And you get to set that. Let's get into the relational dynamics of this. We're going to start with a review of TBRI, what we talked about on the very first session. In TBRI, we learned that the impact of trauma on children gives them an inability to self-regulate, often a distorted belief system. They often carry shame for things that were not their responsibility, but they feel like it was. An inability to trust others and a lack of felt safety. All of these things impact the way a child sees the world, impact the way a child believes, the things the child believes about themselves and about the world around them, and the way they behave. The thing that sometimes gets missed is that traumatized children always grow up with or without safe, nurturing relationships. What I have learned about the families, the mothers, the fathers of the children that we are serving, that we are hosting, is almost always, I think in the last, Libby and I have been kind of working with this for almost a year now. And in the last year, with possibly one exception, every family that has called us has been one of those traumatized children that grew up without safe, nurturing relationships. So what does that look like? What is the impact of childhood trauma on adults? Well, the world isn't a safe place, and the humans in the world aren't a safe place, and so we isolate. We don't trust anybody. That's why when they come on a crisis, they don't have any safe people to care for their kids. They carry a false belief system, and we're going to look at that in a few minutes. Again, I just mentioned the inability to trust. There is nothing safe out there. Think about it. If you're trying to do everything all by yourself and you don't believe you can trust anybody, if that isn't a recipe for anxiety, I do not know what is. If we are living in anxiety, we do not have the ability to regulate ourselves. And dysregulation over a long period of time, well, it's often diagnosed as a personality disorder, and there's several of them. They learn to meet their needs through behaviors that we call manipulation. The only way that they know how to meet their needs is by doing things to either get pity, make you feel guilty, a whole list of things. What they're doing is meeting their needs the best way that they know how. But it can be hard to work with. So let's look at some of the false beliefs that we see often. I must be in control at all times or something bad will happen. Why do they believe that? That belief comes because at some point as a child, something bad happened and they felt out of control. Child's frontal lobe is mush. It's not, they don't have a lot of reason ability. And so it's not the reason I felt out of control was because something bad happened. Their reasoning is something bad happened because I wasn't in control. Everyone is out to get me. Again, that comes from nobody had their back. They were isolated, they were alone, they were abandoned when they needed it. Anger, intimidation, it's the only way to get my needs met. I have to yell loud and make sure everybody knows what my needs are so that I can get them met. Lying is also an acceptable way to get. If I tell you the truth, you might reject me. You might not think that I really need everything that I need. You might refuse to help me at all if you know the truth about who I am. And if I tell a lie here, then I have to tell another lie here and another lie here, and it grows. Another thing, I've worked with a man, probably 15 years ago, who was caring for his wife's children. His wife was incarcerated, and he was caring for her 2 little boys. And he shared with me, before he and his wife got together, before they were even in a relationship, her little boys would crawl out of their bedroom window and walk down the street to his house and ask for food. Because mom wouldn't feed them. And then they'd crawl back in the window. And if mom came in and said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "Well, we went down to the neighbors for food." Is that a safe, healthy thing for them to do? Lying was a survival skill for those 2 little boys. Now it's 5, 6 years later. I believe that they were 9 and 11 at the time. So think how little they were when they're crawling out the window, wandering the neighborhood looking for food. Now they're 9 and 11. And he said, "They lie all the time. I can't trust anything they say." Of course they lie all the time. That's their safety. That's their survival skill. That's doing what they need to do to get their needs met. Sometimes we have to accept that lying and anger and all of that is simply a survival skill for our families, our children, and their parents. Another one that we often come across, and there's 100 false beliefs. I must help or support everyone that asks me to help them, or no one will like me. That all or nothing thing, I have to do it all, or no one will like me. Again, one of the things that we get to do is we get to give them examples. We get to model healthy boundaries and healthy, strong, truthful beliefs for them. So we have 2 sides. We have 2 levels often of boundaries in everyone, but definitely in our families. And we usually find them in the extremes. We've got the castle that is isolated, the individual who's isolated themselves and who builds up strong walls so that nobody can get in, nobody can hurt me. Or we have the commune. We have everybody. I'm gonna love everybody, and what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine, and we'll share everything and life will be grand. Neither one of these two extremes is healthy, but most of our families fall into one of these two camps. Most of our parents fall into one of these two camps. Bruce Perry wrote a book. He's one of my favorite trauma researchers. And this quote comes from the book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. And he said, the more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely he will be to recover from trauma and thrive. Relationships are the agent of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love. I believe this is absolutely true of the children we work with. It is also absolutely true of the adults that tag along with the children that we support. It is challenging, and sometimes it feels like a roller coaster to build a relationship, well, with individuals that don't understand healthy boundaries. I want to watch a video with y'all. I love Brene Brown, and I think that she has some really great insights into boundaries. We're going to talk about this video after she's done. I bet I don't have everything set up. Just a moment. Let me push a couple buttons here to make sure that I've got everything set up. I'm not sure once I push this button if I'm going to be able to see you. So if you can't hear, yell at me or send a text. Well,
It's good.
One of the most shocking findings of my work was the idea that the most compassionate people I have interviewed over the last 13 years were also the absolutely most boundaried. Because
most boundary.
so I'll give you a great definition of the definition of boundary that I use in the book. Boundary is simply what's okay and what's not okay. What I think we do is we don't set boundaries. We let people do things that are not okay or get away with behaviors that are not okay. Then we're just resentful and hateful. Me, I'd rather be loving and generous and very straightforward with what's okay and what's not okay. And I did not, that I learned from the research. I was the exact opposite. I assumed for the first 35 years of my life that people were sucking on purpose just to piss me off. That's what I assumed. Yeah, right. Whether it was someone who worked for me or it was someone family member who was constantly like, I was always critical and judgy. And I was like, why are they choosing these things? Why are they making their choices? They should know better. And then when this thing came up from my therapist, what if people are doing the best they can? I thought, my husband had the most beautiful answer to that question. He said, I'll never know whether people are doing the best they can or not. But when I assume people are, it makes my life better. So now I think I am not as sweet as I used to be, but I'm far more loving.
It's not just some like technique so that you can do that. That's really like a way of being to like nurture that soil of wholeheartedness.
Yeah. Generosity, to assume the best about people, is almost an inherently selfish act, because the life you change first is your own.
You love yourself.
Yeah. And so so my question is big, B-I-G. What boundaries need to be in place for me to stay in my integrity and make the most generous assumptions about you? But generosity can't exist without boundaries, and we are not comfortable setting boundaries because we care more about what people will think, and we don't want to disappoint anyone. We want everyone to like us, and boundaries are not easy. But I think they're the key to self-love, and I think they're the key to treating others with loving kindness. Sustaining. You can't, nothing is sustainable without boundaries. I think compassion and empathy are different things. And again, I'm relying on my data for this. I think compassion is a deeply held belief that we're inextricably connected to each other by something rooted in love and goodness. I call that God. Not everybody calls that God. My dad would call it fishing.
Fishing?
Fishing?
Is it fishing?
No, there's no G in fishing. But I think compassion is a deeply held belief. I think empathy is the skill set to bring compassion alive. So empathy is something we can teach. I mean, it's something we've taught our kids since they were very little. It's about how to communicate that deep love for people in a way so that people don't know they're not alone. I think there's a lot of new interesting information out there about empathy not being a good thing, about that, you know, there's an argument that says, you know, if Travis is in struggle and I practice empathy with you, I'm taking on your darkness, and it leads to burnout and it leads to, but empathy is not feeling for somebody. It's feeling with them. It's touching a place in me that knows where you've been, so I can look at you and say, me too, brother. You're not alone in this. And I find empathy to be infinite. I think it gives back tenfold what you put out.
It's sustaining. Like if
It's sustaining.
if you've done the work and you have your boundaries, I mean, you could tread that water forever and never get tired.
Okay, so empathy. I'm quoting Travis here, empathy. If you've done your work and set your boundaries, you can tread that water forever. Amen. It's not finite. And it keeps giving back to us. And so this idea that, but here we go back to where we started this conversation. Empathy minus boundaries is not empathy. Compassion minus boundaries is not genuine. Vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability. So you see that there's a huge riff here, which is boundaries are freaking important.
Right.
And it's not, they're not fake walls. They're not separation. Boundaries are not division. They're respect. There's here's what's okay for me and here's what's not.
Sorry about that. I would love to hear what some of your takeaways were from what Brene just said. What did you love? What did you agree with? What was there anything you disagreed with? What were your thoughts?
There's an awful lot to unpack in there.
Mm-hmm.
It challenged my thinking about compassion and empathy and the strong boundaries needed to make them genuine.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Susan. Thanks.
I like the strong sense of self that Brene Brown talks about in compassion and empathy. Like if I know who I am so well that I know what is good for me and what's not good for me, I am able to better meet the needs of people around me.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah. Great. Aaron and James, any thoughts?
Um, a lot. I'm just trying to organize them. But I think
yeah, it makes a lot of sense that to be compassionate and to be empathetic, there has to be boundaries. Otherwise, you just, I don't know, you go until there's nothing left. And I'm a nurse, so that I like think about it from that standpoint, especially after coming, working through a pandemic and always being short staffed, always having a need. There's always, something that needs done or somebody to see. And it kind of gets hard because you feel like you have to keep giving, and then you forget yourself. And then going back to what she said too about knowing yourself and what am I able to give. And
Mhm. Yeah, it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot. And we have come through a challenging time, and I cannot imagine how hard it would have been to continue doing all of the work that everybody in our medical community did while they still take care of themselves, while they still take care of their families, while they still, it's huge, and it is so challenging. I'm gonna go through, if I can make there we go. The most compassionate people were also the most boundaried. And then she followed it up with, if we let people get away with things are not okay, and then we are just resentful and hateful. I assure you, I have been there. I have been frustrated with the way people treated me, or the way they took advantage of me, or the way whatever. But the problem was that I didn't set a boundary on my time, on my energy, and that definitely caused problems. I loved this. I'll never know whether people are doing the best they can or not, but when I assume they are, it makes my life better. And as I think about the families that we are working with, they have spent their life, most of them, with people assuming that they are not doing the best they can. They have had people tear them down at every corner from the time that they were small children. They've had everything pointed out that they're doing wrong. Are they doing the best they can now? I don't know. But if I assume that that behavior that is so hard to deal with is the best that they can do, that they are trying to get their needs met, then I'm going to treat them so much better. And we're going to find middle ground and get along so much better. My life is going to be easier. It's going to make my life better. I went back to the dictionary. Hospitality, the definition that I found from the dictionary, yay dictionaries, the friendly and generous reception and entertainment of guests, visitors, or strangers. That is what you all are offering to do as a host home. You are offering to be friendly and generous. Hospitality requires, according to this definition, hospitality requires generosity. And interestingly enough, Brene Brown said, generosity cannot exist without boundaries. Generosity cannot exist without boundaries. There's a huge why do we need to set boundaries right there. Let's move on to the how. We're going to talk about our boundary pitfalls. We're going to talk about setting boundaries and also keeping boundaries. So just like the families that we serve, we all tend to lean toward the castle or the commune. So let's define those a little bit from the perspective of how are we? Who are we? So the castle, they are good at saying no. Is that a bad thing? No, ma'am. No, sir. Good at saying no. They carry high.
Sorry,
Go
can you
ahead.
tell he says no in our relationship? I shook my head and he nodded
I
his
was
head.
kidding. It's okay.
Uh-huh. The castle has high expectations for themselves and for others. Again, high expectations are not a bad thing. They are in tune to the needs of the castle. They are excellent protectors. None of those things are bad things. If, however, they are out of balance, because earlier we said that our greatest strengths out of balance become our pitfalls, well, the castle is frequently frustrated with other people's behaviors. They often view requests for help as asking for a handout. Others may view the castle as unapproachable. They may say something like, I never have the opportunity to serve people, but that comes because maybe people view them as unapproachable. Maybe it's because people, that their expectations of people, well, if they would have done this and this and this, they wouldn't need my help. When they meet this standard, I will help them, right? Oh, I'm seeing some laughter and some smiles here. Somebody's relating. The thing is, these are not bad qualities, but anytime our qualities are out of balance, then we have some struggles. Let's talk about the commune. The commune is good at saying yes. Is that a bad thing, Evan?
I'm not condemning myself.
Good, good.
I'm just laughing at your hippie picture.
You like my hippie picture? Yeah.
Yeah.
They're good at saying yes. They have grace-filled interactions. Again, that's a fantastic thing. They're in tune with the needs of all the people. They see needs and they are trying to meet them all. They have deep empathy. Those are great character traits, right? But if our greatest strengths are out of balance, they become our greatest pitfalls. And what that looks like is exhaustion. The feeling of everybody taking advantage of me, nobody really respects me, they're walking all over me all the time. And then I start to resent people because they don't respect me. I stop respecting them. And then I am burned out. Again, we need to find balance in our strengths. So we've got the castle and we've got the commune on two ends of the spectrum. We all fit between this. Anybody here besides Evan who's already admitted, anybody here willing to say, hey, this is where I'm at on the spectrum? I lean towards one side or the other.
Sorry.
That's no problem.
He has amazing timing. James and I were laughing because he's a castle and I'm a commune.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think a chart has ever defined us as clearly as a chart is defined.
I'm the castle in this relationship.
Yeah, we balance each other out. Every time we'll get a text from our friends like, is there any way you can do respite for us, like whatever tonight? And I'm like, yeah, definitely. And then I'll look at Alyssa and I'm like, oh, maybe I should talk to you about this. Maybe we shouldn't leave work early to go babysit kids for 6 hours.
I don't know.
That
Whatever.
sounds fun, you know? Who else would do it?
Again, I love that both of you guys have the balance on both sides. And that's awesome. We all lean towards one side or the other. And sometimes we lean one direction in one part of our life and another direction in another part of life. If we're talking work, I am commune all the way. If we're talking home life, I'm castle all the way. What we're working toward. We're working towards a nice balanced cottage with layers of boundaries that allow us to say yes and no. No to the dog barking, No to the irritating traveling salesman. Yes to the neighbor. Yes to the individual that maybe can use some support. So setting boundaries. And I think that Alyssa even mentioned this already. Our boundaries in any relationship can exist on a continuum. It's easier to start a boundary. It's easier to start a boundary tighter and relax it. But Alyssa was absolutely accurate. We need to communicate what those boundaries are. We cannot expect other people, especially individuals who have never had any boundaries, who've never lived with boundaries. We can't expect them to understand what our boundaries are. So if we start a relationship, especially with a, the host home and family relationship, if we start that with a little bit firmer boundaries, it's so much easier to give more than it is to take away. That becomes challenging. Starting with the firmer boundary allows for the process of building trust. And so that's also an important part of a relationship. So how do we set boundaries? Love this. No, this is a complete sentence. We have the option of saying, no, I can't do that because blah, 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 but we don't have to. If somebody asks us to do something, we are allowed to just say no. Yes, I could do that for you. I could do it this time. My husband and I had a young kid that adopted us. He would call us mom and dad. He was a cute kid. And we were in community with him enough to know he was making some really, really poor financial decisions. And sure enough, one day he calls, he says, hey, Mom, I've got this situation and I really just need $200. I can pay you back. At payday, which is on the 13th. And we said, yes, I can do that this time. That made it clear that he cannot call me every 2 weeks and ask for more money. That I will certainly support him, but I'm not going to be the bail man. I'm not going to be constantly bailing him out. Another phrase on this theme is, yes, I could help with that this week. That's implying that maybe next week I can't. Libby, I think that you had a really good example of a boundary setting statement.
Yeah, so just last week I had, it was a teen at the time, now she's in her 20s. She called me. She had a lot of trauma early on and has made some risky choices lately. And one of those, instead of her being incarcerated, she landed on probation this time. So that was really exciting. We were really proud of her, getting closer to making those great choices right from the beginning. But with probation, she has to do community service and she doesn't have a car and she needs to go to this place 11 weeks in a row on Tuesdays. And so she called me and was like, hey, can you give me a ride to this place every Tuesday at, 1 p.m. and then pick me up at, 6 o'clock? And I didn't say yes at all to that. Instead, I said, I can't in the middle of the day. I'm working on Tuesdays at 1. And so I can't come pick you up for 11 weeks in a row, but you could ride the bus and I could go with you and help you practice riding the buses that you would need to ride so that you know how to get there yourself. And so she did. We practiced riding the buses. The buses are free right now still because of COVID. And she made it there on Tuesday. She texted me. It was perfect. She got there with plenty of time. And she feels confident that she can do it now on her own all the rest of the weeks. So mine wasn't necessarily a no to everything. It was, no, I can't do what you're asking, but we can brainstorm maybe some other ways that I can help you meet your own needs.
Thank you, Olivia. I love that because sometimes the boundary is thinking outside the box. My youngest daughter, when she was about 3, I think, came up to me one day with a cookie in each hand. And she said, "Mommy, can I have 1 cookie or 2?" I was fixing supper. No, you can't have either. A lot of times when we are given a request, we think our only options are yes or no. But sometimes it's a yes and no, or a neither yes or no. I can't do it, but I can help you in this way. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. That is still setting a boundary. My favorite, I think, boundary setting statement is, "I would like to help you with this. Let me think about what that would look like and get back to you." The reason that this one is so important is a lot of times the requests that are made in a moment of crisis. When our parents, our individuals are in their downstairs brain, and they're thinking in crisis, fight or flight, survival mode. And it's easy for us to get drawn into that and give an answer based on their crisis. First off, they may not even be asking for something that is the best thing that they need. So if we model taking time to think through it for them, that's a great model. It also allows us to not get pulled into their crisis. We are reactive creatures, and if somebody calls us in a crisis, we sometimes get all amped up ourselves, and we sometimes do things that we don't need to do. And so I'd like to help you with this. Let me think about it and get back to you. A boundary of a space of time is an excellent one. I'm going to go back to this. I recently got pulled into this with a mom that had a hosting almost 2 years ago, and she's had her child back, but she stayed in contact with me as her family advocate. And I got a phone call from her the other day, and she was in panic mode. It was 9 o'clock at night. I was on my way home from my granddaughter's dance recital. And she called and she said, "I'm at the hospital. I've got my baby in the emergency room and I don't know what to do. And I can't get a hold of the host home," who is still part of her life. They've become part of her support system. "I can't get a hold of them and I just don't know what to do." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said he threw up 3 times. Like, "What do you mean?" "Well, we went out for pizza and he ate a whole bunch of pizza and he threw up." And I think the day before she noticed, she watched him pull a knife, or not a knife, a nail out of his foot. He'd stepped on a rusty nail. She'd taken him to the doctor. The doctor said he was fine. He was up to date on his vaccines. He wasn't going to get tetanus. Everything was great. But when he threw up after eating pizza, her brain immediately went to, "This is obviously tetanus." "Aaron, you said you're a nurse. You can tell me. I don't know anything about tetanus, but my understanding is that's not going to be the first symptom."
Right.
Am I accurate? Okay. So the thing is, and the doctor had just told her earlier that day that he was fine, that there was no sign of infection. She finally got a hold of the family, the host family, and they called me and they said, "What's going on?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm on my way to the hospital to help her calm down, and we'll check on it." But the host mom was all sorts of, "I gotta get there because he's in the emergency room." And I said, "I'm closer than you are. Let me get there and I'll check in with you." My goal was to calm mom down. And when I got there, the little guy was running around the hospital room with a flashlight that doesn't work, shining the flashlight that doesn't work that he'd stolen from a nurse on all of the things on the wall. He was happy as a clam and not in bad shape at all. But mom was still in survival mode. it's so easy to get pulled into that. That time is a great thing. All right, keeping boundaries. It's one thing to set a boundary, it's another thing to keep a boundary. And I want to emphasize before I start this that there are times that we set a boundary and we may need to make a change. We may need to adjust. And if it's a well thought out, and if you are using your layers of boundaries, that's fine. But I also want to emphasize keeping a boundary equates to speaking the truth. If we set a boundary but don't keep it, we are not speaking the truth. We are not creating respect and trust. When I started in human services, I was working with a single mom. I was a family support worker. I went to a foster home, picked up kids, and I took them to their moms for a visit. And one day, this one mom had a newborn, 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I honestly can't remember the behavior of the 3-year-old, but it was a normal 3-year-old behavior that tends to irritate us. And the 3-year-old did this behavior, whatever it was, and mom looked at him and her and said, "If you do that again, I'm gonna throw you out the window." Guess what the 3-year-old did? The 3-year-old did it again. Sure enough. So the family support worker walked over to the window and opened it. It was late December and it was really cold outside. And the mom said, "What are you doing? Close that window, it's freezing." And I said, "You made a promise to your child. I don't want her to get glass in her arm when you throw her out the window. I'm not going to throw my daughter out the window." We do that sometimes, maybe not the extreme of I'm going to throw you out the window, but it's also important that when we set a boundary, that we go ahead and enforce that boundary. And it's okay. It also builds respect. When we keep a boundary, we're modeling healthy behaviors. We're modeling healthy behaviors that possibly our families may not have seen in the past. You know, the goal of modeling behavior is to encourage others to mimic, which means that our families may actually set boundaries with us. And that's a great thing. We want them to learn to set healthy boundaries with us as well. I worked at, when I was working with community corrections, and I went in and I had a mom that was actually doing amazing, but she had been sexually assaulted as a young child. There is nothing that teaches an individual that they cannot set boundaries than being sexually assaulted as a young child. It's the biggie, because I don't even have the ability to say no to my body, obviously, and this belief sticks in their brain. And that was her story. And her mother was running the show. This lady was 40 years old with a passel of children, and mom was running the show. And this mom, the grandma was running the show, and mom couldn't say no to her. So we'd been talking about boundaries. I encouraged her to set a boundary with somebody that was safe. I came in one day to the prison to work with her, and they called her, and she came up to the front desk and she said, "I just got back from that class that I go to in the morning, and well, I just talked to one of my friends and asked her if she wanted to grab some towels and go lay out in the yard." And I said, "So this isn't a good time?" "No, it's not." I said, "Okay." And we figured out a time for me to come back. I went home, and my husband, I'd been at home, went to the prison, was expecting to be there for an hour and a half or so. I come home and my husband says, "Oh, you're home soon." I said, "Yeah, she was going to lay out with friends." He went, "A professional came to meet with her and she's laying out instead?" And I said, "Yep." And I couldn't be more proud of her. She found a safe person to set a boundary with. I saw her the next day and I said, "I'm so proud of you." And she got tears in her eyes. She says, "I was so afraid. I didn't want to make you mad. I said, am I mad? I'm proud of you. If we can encourage them to set boundaries and they set them with us, that's room for celebration. So here's the deal: as a relationship grows and changes, so will the boundaries in that relationship. To finish off, we need to be willing to be flexible with those boundaries once we start establishing trust. You have the option to be firm, you have the option to flex a little bit. But do listen to your emotions. If you're feeling resentful, you need to keep your boundaries. If you're dreading, I mean, there have been times my phone's ringing and I look at it and I go, not again, right? That means I'm not setting boundaries the way I need to. Am I feeling exhausted or burned out? Give yourself a break. It's okay. Use your layers of boundaries. Those of you who are here that are the commune, go ahead and let your spouse pull you toward the castle for a little bit. Get some rest, take a break. If you need respite, man, let's work on that. Let's find somebody in your care community to support you on that. But then do embrace and celebrate growth, both in you and in the families that we're working with. This is where we want to end up. We want to make sure that we have welcoming boundaries with layers. Any thoughts, questions before we take a break? Y'all are so quiet.
You did great, Ronnie. We talked some
Ah.
about boundaries.
Thank you.
I'm mulling. Yeah. I'm just mulling it over thinking I need more work on my boundaries.
Don't we all, Susan? Don't we all? Definitely. Yeah.
I feel like I have so much contrast or context to contrast to this after having our replacements.
Oh, yeah.
Like I'm just
Yeah.
trying to imagine taking this and not having all of that have happened and just being like, man, this just must be like the wild cases. No, this is normal, I think.
Yeah, it is. And at one point, one of the things that I thought about putting in to the presentation was how many of you like roller coasters, right? Because sometimes this is a roller coaster. How many of you like roller coasters without all of the harnesses and the buckles and all of those things? The boundaries are the harnesses and the buckles that keep us safe and sane as we go through. Some of these cases get wild. We don't all get to have the mom that says, I just need the host home to tell me what their boundaries are so that I can follow them. When I brought that story back to the office, they went, is she for real? Does she have other family members that need help? Because we want to help them all. I assure you, she's the anomaly in her family. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? James?
I think it is so important. I have no right to be upset at you about something that I did not communicate to you. I have no right to put an expectation on you that I have not like talked to you about or had with you. And when you don't make that clear, then you just build resentment and anger, and you start putting context to your own feelings to them and saying, well, they're this way because of this, and if they would have just done this one differently and all these different things, and you get so upset about them and you haven't even talked to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Brene Brown has another concept that she calls the story I tell myself. And when I don't set a boundary and somebody crosses the boundary that I didn't verbally set, and I feel resentful, the story I tell myself is that person's just trying to bug me. That person's out to get me. And then that spirals out of control as well. Yeah. Great discussion. Great thoughts.
Yeah, one more thing. I think that sometimes there are the people that we serve sometimes have different kinds of social experiences, and we might associate certain social interactions as like, oh, that's like off limits. Like that's you're not picking up on the social cues. Well, maybe they just had a different experience. Maybe they're from a different family culture. Maybe they're from a different ethnic culture. And so you can't assume like, oh, well, they should have known that. That's just, they should have picked up on that. Well, no, maybe they just don't know that. They weren't a part of your family. They're not a part of your social circle. And so kind of like what you said, Evan, like, you just got to communicate that. And that's really hard. And I like what you said earlier, Ronnie, like talking about it beforehand. You know, it's hard to create a boundary after the fact. So create it for them, which it could be hard because you're like, I don't know what I'm going to have to create a boundary around. Obviously, give grace and ask for grace too a lot as you work with the families we work with. If you give grace, they will learn. They might not know immediately, but they'll learn how to give grace. And I'm sure there'll be times where they give you a lot more grace than you give them. And then you're like, oh man, like I should be more gracious. They've been so patient with me as I'm trying to care for their kids, and I blew up at them, and it'll happen. So give grace and receive grace.
Thanks, James. That was good. That was good. Well, do we want to take a 5-minute break? And I see that Roy has joined us.
Yeah, Roy's on, but we'll take a 5-minute break. And then I'm going to actually stop the recording and then do it again. So we have it in 2 different parts. It's a little easier uploading that way.
Oh, yeah,
So
that
take
works.
a 5-minute break and we'll come back here at like 7:56. Great.
Sounds good. Thank you.